Hello. Today I'm going to talk about my top 10 Eastern occult books. There was a vote I did about what video to do next, and this was the winner. So thank you to all that voted. But I was kind of happy because I wanted to do this video next anyway, so it was the right one. I'll say this first, that if you like what you see here, you can also check out, or maybe if you don't know much about the occult, you should check this video out first. But I'm going to put the video up there, and it is my top 10 Western occult books. That was a quite popular video, and this will be kind of the companion video for it. So I'm going to start out by saying that I've been studying the occult for a long time. Without even knowing it, probably most of my life, but actively knowing it, I would say at least the last 25 years, maybe, close to 25 years. A lot of that time was with the Western mindset, but I moved to Asia in 2009, and I've been here mostly ever since. I did one more year back home, but I've also lived in different countries here, and it has definitely influenced my mindset when it comes to occultism. And I will say that many of the books on this list might not be considered occultism, at least in terms of how you know them. But I'm going to get pretty deep into it, and maybe by the end you will reassess some of these if you've read them. If not, I don't know. But anyway, if you want to like and subscribe, you can do that, or hit the bell for notifications. All that really helps my channel, and I appreciate it a lot. Okay, so let's start. There's a few things I have to say before we get into the actual list. And the first thing is there's a fine line between philosophy, occultism, and spirituality. Often those things are very mixed, and I think in the West and the East, they're both like that. But the fundamental difference that I've come to terms with is that the West is more about the will and about kind of dominating nature. And I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, but it's more about using your action to kind of take control. And that's really what the sort of Western Hermetic tradition is, I think, having been over here for a while and seeing it from a different point of view. Whereas the East is about letting go, about becoming one with nature. So instead of dominating nature, you're kind of going with the flow of nature. Now, that might make it seem like these books are kind of strange to call occult, because from the Western lens, they're almost the opposite. They just don't follow the same rules. But by the end, I think you'll understand what I'm getting at. Now, I'm going to say that in this list, it says Eastern occult books, but this is specifically East Asia, I'd say, and a little bit of Southeast Asia. I'm not really going into kind of India and that area of Asia. I think that's a different point of view, and it's not really something I'm all that interested in. I've looked into a bit of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and stuff, and they're not really my thing. So I'm not going to get into those. So if that disappoints you, if you're looking for that kind of occultism, that ain't going to be here. Now, with that said, there are some other things I'm going to sidestep as well. Having lived here for a long time, there's a Confucianist mindset to Asia. almost all of it, to be honest, in some way or another. And you're not going to find any Confucianist really books on here. Having lived in Asia, I don't think it's a very effective philosophy. It might have been effective a long time ago, but it does not work anymore, in my opinion. And it causes a lot of problems, actually, in my opinion. So I'm definitely not going to discuss that. So what I'm going to really focus most on is mainly Daoism and Zen Buddhism, I guess, are the main two. And I think the reason for that is, in my opinion, Confucianism is very rigid. There are many rules, and it's very, it almost breaks things down into so many hierarchies that there's just no way to have any freedom in it. That's one reason why I think a lot of sort of communist thought can be traced into areas of places where they've had Confucianist mindset. So I'm definitely not going to get into that, but I'm going to focus mostly on Daoism and some Zen Buddhism. I'm going to start first with saying this thing of action versus flow. So now in the West, that's basically what we always think of as action. If you think of Crowley or any of the great occultists, they're always talking about the will, or using your the strength of the magician's mind to kind of bend the will of these spirits and things to get things done. Well, in this mindset, it's the complete opposite of that. It's more about flow, and it's more about the Tao. And when talking about the Tao, the word that comes up most is Wu Wei, which is translated as non-action or effortless action. So it's like do without doing, if that makes sense. And having dived into this literature since living here, I can see a great power in that. And maybe if I had experienced that in my 20s, I don't think I would have recognized it. So by saying that, I'm saying that a lot of these works have an underlying hidden kind of almost conundrum type meaning to many of the things that they say. And once you kind of get the key to that, I think it's easier to unlock the potentials and the power in these puzzles, these kind of conundrums. And that's definitely why I think this could be considered occult, because it does have secret or esoteric meanings. So I mean, the main thing is effortless action. So to do action without any effort. Now, that seems like a conundrum, right? And it probably is, but I have actually witnessed in my own life times where I was trying to do something, I was kind of forcing it, and it never worked. But as soon as I let go and just let the current take me, let's say, then everything kind of fell into place. That's kind of what they mean. But they don't mean just giving up and not being active. One great thing about Wu Wei and Daoism is naturalness. So to try to be natural in everything you do. Sometimes if you let's say you meet someone, let's say it's like a romantic thing where you like somebody, let's say, and you think that in order to win them, you have to do A, B, and C. Well, if you look from the Taoist mindset, no matter what you do, if you are supposed to be in the flow with this person, you will eventually be in the flow with this person. Now, you could do A, B, and B or C, but you should not be attached to the result of A, B, or C, because that might not get you to that person. It might be somewhere way down the line, some other part of the river, let's say, down the line. And your action of A, B, and C actually drew you further away from that person, even though you were trying to be closer to that person. So that's kind of the problem we're having with this stuff, is that it's definitely a recognizing of energies and how they work. So naturalness is one part, spontaneity is another part. Many of these works talk about being spontaneous and how true magic happens through spontaneity, which again is kind of different than the Western esoteric tradition. Unless you were to include chaos magic in that case, I think they're onto something. But if you're talking about the more ritual-based ceremonial magic, that's kind of the opposite of spontaneity, in my opinion, because you're planning everything and you're making it organized in some way. Another thing that's very important is being in alignment with the Tao. Now, what that means is complicated, because many of these books devote many, many, many pages on this alignment with the Tao. And if you can't see it clearly for what it is, it's going to appear to be a bunch of nonsense, I would say. But non-interference is the main thing. Don't interfere with the flow of nature. Let nature take its course, basically. Now, some ways that this is actually very similar to Western occult practices are the elemental similarities. In the West, there's the kind of alchemical symbolism, fire, water, air, spirit, and all those. They have the same thing in Chinese alchemy and Daoism. Whether they're showing you actual symbols or whether they're talking about these symbols, there's usually several meanings underneath the symbolism. We're going to get more into it as I start talking about the videos. Sorry for the long introduction, but I had to kind of preface everything with that, because if you're not seeing it from this point of view, none of this is really going to be worthwhile. So 2 things I'm going to kind of sidestep and not really talk about here too much is Bushido and Shinto. If you want to look into those, it's all very fascinating too. This is mainly, like I said, Zen Buddhism and Daoism. The first book that we have is our number 10, and that is The Way of Changu by Thomas Merton. He's the translator. And it's a Chinese Taoist book, and through anecdotes and dialogues, it explores Taoist concepts such as the nature of reality, the Tao, and non-action, Wu Wei. The book covers relativity, language limitations, and naturalness, offering a humorous and paradoxical exploration of existence. Okay, so what I appreciate about this book, and it's why it's my number 10, is there's a quite poetic quality to the verses, and they're very, there's a sense of humor about them, and like other books on this list, there's mystery in between the words, let's say. And what I mean by that is, if you know anything about the I Ching, which I'll get to later, there's the flat line and there's the broken line, right? And if you consider words as being kind of the space between them creates the thing, that's kind of what a lot of these poems are about. It's not just the words that are there, it's the space between the words, it's the meanings you get from the combination of the words, because a lot of it is highly symbolized with nature symbolism, and also kind of like folk tales, like with weird trees, or the farmer that does this or that. So a lot of it, it's almost kind of like folklore, I guess, in a way. But I think the book is quite solid, and it's not the greatest because it's number 10, but it's a good start if you want to see something from kind of Chinese Daoism. At number 9, we have Be Here Now, or Remember Be Here Now, and that's by Ram Dass. And this is the one sort of yoga kind of book I have on here. Only because I read this actually in the USA, but it really hit me very hard. A transformative guide blending Eastern spirituality with Western psychology. Divided into 3 parts, it narrates the author's journey, visually explores spiritual concepts, and offers practical advice for conscious living, emphasizing the importance of being present. I should say that it has a kind of interesting story about how I got this book. I was trying to get home to Detroit when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and it was a Christmas time, and there was a snowstorm. So I was very kind of screwed, let's say. And I had waited several years to get this flight to go home, and I was very homesick at the time. And I also had some people I needed to see, an ex-lover I wanted to see, a bunch of people I was going to see. So I really, really, really needed to get home. And this snow came, and they delayed the flight. So I was in the hotel, or the airplane, sorry. My brain is fried from work today. Too many kids. Anyway, I was in the airport, and I was reading this book. I had just gotten this book not too long before, and I was just really bummed out. I was like, oh, I can't believe this isn't going to happen. And it was kind of on the fence at the moment whether the flights would actually run or not. And I remember being very discouraged, and this woman was kind of sitting a few seats away, and she noticed that I was reading the book. And I was like, wow, okay. She mentioned it. And it just kind of, the way that she kind of appeared and what she was saying made me realize that, like, no matter what happens, it is what's going to happen, and I can't really change it. Eventually, I did get back to Detroit. The flight was canceled. I had to rent a car, had to drive to a different airport. It was quite an ordeal. And I got back, and it turned out when I got back, I saw all the people that I wanted to see, but the main reason I wanted to go back was a disaster. So the lesson there is maybe the universe was trying to tell me I wasn't supposed to go back, but I was forcing it, trying to go back, and it just didn't turn out. So I have a soft spot for this book, and that's kind of why I put it on the list. Like I said, it's more of a kind of a yoga book, but there are many things about being in the present on this book that apply to the other books on this list. So I think it's a great book, especially if you're just starting out. At number 8, we have You Are Here, Discovering the Magic of the Present Moment by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist. In this insightful guide, he encourages readers to embrace mindfulness and fully engage with the present moment. Through practical exercises and gentle teachings, the book provides a roadmap for cultivating awareness, finding joy, and experiencing the transformative power of living in the now. I'm a pretty big fan of him. I go back to this quite a lot, and I talk about it in my other video on self-improvement, if you want to check that out. This is actually more about breathing and mindfulness and walking and sitting and even how to do proper speech. And I think on the surface that doesn't seem like it would be occult, but I think that there are advantages by having these things. If you're trying to have visualizations or meditating, let's say, being mindful and proper breathing will help with that. There's a lot in here on healing emotional pain, which I also think is quite important. We all have our blocks, and when you can kind of tear away those walls or break them down, usually you might start flowing a lot more, which goes back to what I'm saying about flow. And the other thing I think this book does well is talks about compassion. That's something I don't think that is often brought up in Western occultism, is compassion. You know, most people see the occult as black magic, which I don't. I think it can be, but having gone through a lot of kind of cycles with the occult, I realize now that the ultimate aim is to try to do the best for your, not just for yourself, but for whatever you do for yourself also affects those around you. So if you can improve yourself, you can also improve those around you. And that is a form of compassion, I'd say. So yeah, this is a great book, and I recommend anything by him that you can get your hands on. They're all good. At number 7, we have The Zen Experience by Thomas Hoover. This book is a comprehensive exploration of Zen Buddhism, providing a historical and philosophical overview of its origins and development. Hoover delves into the teachings of Zen masters, the significance of meditation, and the practical application of Zen principles in everyday life, offering readers a rich and insightful guide to understanding and embodying the essence of Zen philosophy. What is great about this book is it's kind of, I think it's the best in terms of giving you a historical context. It also has practical knowledge, but it does kind of the lineage from China to Japan. A lot of people, I don't think they realize that many of the Japanese concepts actually come from China. So there's definitely a kind of wellspring there. Also in Korea, the Chinese had the Koreans under their thumb for a while, so there's a lot of Chinese influence here. Although unfortunately, I haven't found a lot of Korean occult books, weirdly, even though I live here. I don't know. I think Koreans are very stuck in the Confucianist mindset, so they're often looking at things in a very material way. I'm not saying there's not religion here and there's not spirituality, because there is, but I don't really have the access to it as a foreigner that I might in the West. At number 6, I have Chinese Alchemy, Daoism, the Power of Gold, and the Quest for Immortality by Gene Cooper. This book explores the historical and philosophical aspects of Chinese alchemy. Gene Cooper delves into the symbolism of alchemical texts, the pursuit of immortality, and the transformation of the individual through Taoist practices. Yeah, so this book is probably the closest to Western occult books, mainly because it's dealing with alchemy, which I think there's alchemy all over the world. But that's one thing I think a Westerner can kind of grab onto. But it is in contrast with the Hermetic ideal, because the sort of transformations that are going on, this sort of drive to immortality, I think in the West we see it as kind of like I don't know if you've ever read the book The Centenarian by Balzac. That kind of thing, where immortality is a physical thing. But in this case, it's about the body becoming one with the Tao, which kind of means like a death, I'd say. But it also has to do with gaining power from channeling these kind of elemental energies. I'll talk a little bit more about them in the next book, but I think this is a good introduction to Chinese alchemy if you're interested in that kind of thing. Now, one kind of funny aside, if you've ever seen the film Big Trouble in Little China, there's a lot of Chinese alchemy in that film, and a lot of it is absurd, but actually a lot of it is quite, I don't want to say accurate, but they're onto something, let's say. Okay, coincidentally, my number 5 book is actually called The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. It's a classic work on the art of strategy and martial philosophy written by the renowned Japanese swordsman and samurai. Divided into 5 books, Musashi imparts his wisdom on strategy, tactics, and the mindset required for success in both martial arts and life, with a focus on adaptability, timing, and understanding the principles of combat. Musashi's teachings extend beyond the battlefield, offering valuable insights into the strategic mindset applicable to various aspects of personal and professional life. So this book actually blew me away, and I will say why. On the surface, this seems like a book written by a samurai to teach you how to do combat. He's an impressive samurai. There are accounts that he won 61 duels. I don't know if that's true, but that's quite impressive. So much of this book isn't really about combat, I don't think. And I would say, just like I said earlier, that there is some hidden things here. The way he describes things is very elemental, and if you know anything about elemental forces, and the symbolism and correlations that go along with them, there's a lot here. And again, like in the Taoist idea, there's this kind of conundrum going on, this duality. So some of the things that he really focuses on is the accordance with what he calls the way, but it's basically the Tao. And he talks about, like, for example, things like stance and no stance. So you can stand, but you can also not stand at the same time. So you have like when you have a stand, like I used to be in wrestling when I was in high school, and you had kind of different stances you could get ready in for when the match started. And what he's kind of saying is you're in the stance, but you are free of the stance at the same time. And I think that's actually very useful when you're trying to work with occult things, is to understand that we're in this moment, we're in the proper moment, and you have to be active but loose at the same time. As soon as you're tight, then you fail. And that's kind of what he says through this book, is that those that are tight, they always lose, because they're not in the way, let's say, and not understanding the duality and conundrum of the universe, which is you win when you lose and you lose when you win, kind of. So he's talking about the similarity between mind and breath, and how you can be tense but expansive at the same time. You can also be relaxed but inward at the same time. There's all these kind of dualities that he's talking about, and I think that there's a lot here. Now, people use it that are in like the martial arts often, not just sword play, but like karate and other forms of martial arts. It's also used in business, which I think is a form of combat anyway. So there's a lot of great things here. At number 4, we have The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, a seminal work that introduces readers to the philosophy and practices of Zen Buddhism. Alan Watts, a Western interpreter of Eastern philosophy, explores the essence of Zen by examining its historical development, key principles, and the transformative experience it offers. With clarity and insight, Watts discusses the concept of zazen, seated meditation, the importance of direct experience, and the fundamental nature of reality, providing a profound and accessible introduction to the way of Zen. Well, I'm a big fan of Alan Watts. I've been reading him for years. I definitely think this is probably his best book. I could have put several on this list. He is a very important thinker, and he has many talks on YouTube. If you don't want to read a book and you just want to listen to a talk, he has many talks on YouTube. I'm going to show you a clip real quickly, just to give you an idea of who Alan Watts is, if you don't know, and then I'll come back and talk a bit about the clip.
You can't transform yourself. You can't make yourself sane. You can't make yourself loving. You can't make yourself unselfish. And yet it's absolutely necessary that we be that way. It's absolutely necessary. If we are going to hand over the direction of nature to nature, which is what it comes to, it's absolutely necessary that we let go of ourselves, and it can't be done. Not by anything that we call doing it, acting, willing, or even just accepting things. You can't do it. Why? Because you don't really exist as that kind of a separate ego or personality. It's just an idea based on a phony feeling. So when it comes down to it, it's shocking news for us, for the human race, for our pride. You're only making a mess by trying to put things straight. You're trying to straighten out a wiggly world, and no wonder you're in trouble. So you can't do anything. So you can't transform yourself. And what can you do? What happens then if you actually realize you've come to a dead end? And the human race has come to a dead end, in my opinion. What then? Commit suicide? Or is there something else? What happens when you just wait? There's nothing you can do. You watch. And all you see is what goes on that is happening of itself. You're breathing, the wind is blowing, the trees are waving, your blood is circulating, your nerves are tingling. It's all going on of itself. But you know, that's you. That's the real you. The you that goes on of itself. It's not the symbol. It's not the person. It's you that's happening, as when you breathe. Yes, you can get the feeling that I am breathing by shoving your breath, but your breath goes on day in and day out without your doing anything about it or even thinking of it. The same way your brain is functioning without your forcing it. So when you come to a dead end, and we are individually and socially now in 1971 at a dead end, this is the moment of which it is said man's extremity is God's opportunity. Because we have to stop. And when we stop, we find a world that is happening rather than being done, being shoved. And that happening, as distinct from doing, is our fundamental self. And our fundamental self is not something just inside the skin. It's everything around us with which we connect. When you look out of your eyes at nature happening out there, you're looking at you. I'm not going to say what we should do from then on, but simply that before we think of doing anything in this critical situation, we realize the completely illusory nature of the beings that we think we are, and get back again to the beings that we really are, which includes all this outside world, no longer left outside.
Okay, so there's a lot in there. I mean, the thing with Alan Watts is he's kind of a Yoda-like figure. He has this kind of humor, and he has this way of breaking down very complicated ideas into very simple, digestible tidbits. And in the video, I think one of the things that comes to mind when he was talking about that is I've been reading a lot about Gnosticism. If you know anything about Gnosticism, the demiurge is kind of the false god, right? There's a real god behind the false god who is the real light. The false god is the god that everybody prays to, and it's kind of like delusional. Like, he thinks he's the real god, right? Now, if you really think about our ego as the demiurge, then you can kind of see where our ego, we think that's us, but it's not us. What is us is a more elemental kind of immortal microcosm, macrocosm, as above, so below kind of being, if that makes sense. So the ego is kind of the below, but there's an above version of us as well. And I think that many of these books, that's one of the great things about Eastern occultism or Eastern spirituality, let's say, is that there is this thing of trying to abolish the ego. Now, in the West, I feel like a lot of the occultists are kind of like egomaniacs, actually. So maybe, they can't identify with this. I don't know. But I like the idea of waking up to the fact that your ego is a delusion. It's very interesting. And number 3, we have The Art of War by Sun Tzu. A classic Chinese treatise on strategy and military tactics that has transcended its original context and become a guide for strategic thinking in various fields. Sun Tzu imparts timeless wisdom on the nature of conflict, emphasizing the importance of planning, adaptability, and understanding the psychology of opponents. The book offers strategic insights that extend beyond the battlefield, making it a widely studied and applied work in areas such as business, leadership, and competitive situations where strategic thinking is crucial. Kind of like the Book of Five Rings by Musashi, this doesn't feel like it should be on this list, but bear with me a second and I'll explain why. One of the things that this book does well is helps you understand about planning. On the surface, people think of planning as an active endeavor. But if you look at it like the Tao, you can have action and inaction at the same time. So by setting up the perfect situation, and when I say perfect situation, I'm not saying your plan. I'm saying creating a system, an area where you allow for chaos, you allow for the unexpected, but you still have an idea of what you're going to do. And I think that a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people just, this is what they're going for, and they plan for that, and they try the plan and it fails. Going back to my story about the flight, that was my plan, was to get home, and everything got in the way of that plan. Everything. Now, the beauty of this book is that it shows you that if you haven't planned correctly, which I didn't, I was too young, you haven't factored in those unexpected elements. And I think obviously that works very well in business or in battle or any situation where you're going up against a force or another person. I think on a very basic level, I just learned a lot from having conversations with people after I read this book. Like, many people see conversations as a battle. They don't see it as a synergistic kind of harmony. They see it as a fight, And I didn't really notice that until I read this book. Conversations can be super ego-driven. Almost the more ego-driven they are, the more they become like a battle. And in the West, I think this happens all the time. That's one thing I appreciate about the East, is people are not so kind of in your face, especially about their opinions. They tend to keep their opinions closer to their chest. But having read this, I think I can now efficiently sort of sidestep their forceful action in their conversations and be able to it's almost like a keto or something, trying to divert the energy and move it. I mean, I used to do that when I was in wrestling too. You kind of divert the energy and turn it a different way. And I think, I never really considered that when I was doing that physically, but you can also do that mentally. And I think this book helps do that. But there's also, again, a lot of hidden symbolism in this book. Alchemical symbolism, natural symbolism. They talk about wood breaking and bending the wood and not breaking the wood, like all these different things. I think it's very simple in its delivery, so I just think it's great. Okay, the last two on the list are definitely the most important. The number 2 book is the I Ching, Book of Changes, and I prefer the Richard Wilhelm translation. Many people call that the definitive book. It's a comprehensive and influential work that presents the ancient Chinese divination text to a Western audience. Wilhelm's translation, accompanied by commentary, provides insights into the hexagrams, lines, and philosophical underpinnings of the I Ching. His work has played a significant role in popularizing this ancient Chinese text and making it accessible to a broader readership interested in its wisdom for understanding the patterns of change and decision-making in life. Like my other list, my Western occult list, on that list I had the tarot, the Tarot Handbook by Akron and Hanjo Banzhaf. In this case, I see the I Ching as the Eastern version of the tarot, and it also has the same levels of symbolic, esoteric ideas in it. In fact, I think you could just read this book and not even use it for divination. I think there's a lot to learn in here. I know of this book from a friend I met way back. We weren't friends for very long. It was kind of one of those fast relationships. But, she gave me this gift, and it definitely has served me well over the years. I still use it. And it's just, it has so much. I don't even know where to begin to tell you, because if you've never used it, like the tarot, it has these kind of archetypal stages you can be in, but the main difference is that these are more nature oriented. And there's a lot of symbolism, like the mountain and the lake, and there's the solid lines and the unbroken lines. They make the trigrams, and weirdly, like, these are kind of secret symbols as well. Even on Daikuki, the Korean flag, they have the trigrams from the I Ching on there, and it's Korean flag. And most people don't even know what they mean, but it's the elements, basically. So it's very interesting that this stuff can be in plain sight and people just don't know. But I have another video on stillness that has to do with the I Ching, if you want to check that out. But I really think there's a lot to be gained by reading this, so that's why it's my number 2. My number 1 is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Comprising 81 short chapters, the book offers profound insights into the nature of existence, the concept of the Tao, the Way, and the art of living a harmonious life. Lao Tzu emphasizes simplicity, humility, and the practice of wu-wei, non-action. This book changed my life, continues to change my life. The one I'm reading right now is the Dr. Wayne Dyer version, and I keep rereading it. I keep going through it because it's these short, digestible chunks, but they have their verse, and then they have his kind of distilled version, these are very good if you're meditating or something to kind of think about. But I think this is just great. There's so much in here. I'm just going to actually randomly, this is very Taoist, but I'm just going to randomly pick a page. Okay, here's my page, and I'm going to read it real quick, and we'll talk about it for a second. So it's the 55th verse. He who is in harmony with the Tao is like a newborn child. Deadly insects will not sting him. Wild beasts will not attack him. Birds of prey will not strike him. Bones are weak, muscles are soft, yet his grasp is firm. He has not experienced the union of man and woman, but is whole. His manhood is strong. He screams all day without becoming hoarse. This is perfect harmony. To know harmony is to know the changeless. To know the changeless is to have insight. Things in harmony with the Tao remain. Things that are forced grow for a while, but then wither away. This is not the Tao. And whatever is against the Tao soon ceases to be. And on the other side, Wayne Dyer says, I attract the cooperative power of the Tao when I release the need to control anyone's life, including my own. I mean, that's really what this is about, is letting go of control, and by letting go of control, gaining ultimate control. And what I mean by that is control of the weaker parts of yourself, to the point where you are so confident that you are doing the way, that you are walking the way, that nothing can hurt you. That everything that happens to you, it might seem like a misfortune, but it's part of the Tao, and it's part of taking you to where you need to be. And even death would be another step of following the Tao. So the Tao is immortal. Therefore, death is not an end. It's just another condition where you have to let go, because if you don't and you grab on, then you cease to be, is what they're saying here. So you see this a lot with people that age very quickly. I see people, they're actually a lot younger than me, and I can see them aging so fast. And it's partly because they're constantly grabbing onto things and trying to keep them. Like if it's a person, they're trying to grab this person and not let go. If it's a behavior that they do, same thing. They're grabbing onto it. They don't want to let it go. They don't want to change. And you have to change. And that's the whole point of this book, is change. And that's kind of why the I Ching is called the Book of Changes. It's the flow. And in order for there to be the flow, everything has to change. And I think that's something that the Western occult books don't always tackle. I feel like in Western occultism there's a goal, whereas there's not a goal. It's the opposite of goal. In fact, the goal is the furthest thing from the goal, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it's a great book. And I will say this one last thing about the difference between these two things, about Western occultism and Eastern occultism. I've gained a lot from both. So I'm not just trying to say that one is better than the other. But where I'm at right now, I think the Eastern one fits better with my flow, let's say. But you never know. Maybe the Tao will take me somewhere else, and then for a while the Western one will be more my flow. I don't know. But that's about all I have. These are my top 10 Eastern occult books. If you have anything to say about any of them, or if you think there are some that I left off the list that you think should be on here, you can comment about those. And that's about it. Take care. Have a good day. You can like and subscribe if you want to. I will see you later. Goodbye.